Would you like to make stunning handmade clay gifts with no kiln required? I'm showing you how to create expensive looking gifts using air dry clay. 10 genius projects that are beginner friendly to gift to a friend, loved one, or for yourself. These are fun, easy, and will definitely impress. I've rolled out the air dry clay to 1 centimeter in thickness and want to create some indents. The absolute easiest way to create indents is using things like ping pong balls and bottle tops. I press them into the clay to create little wells. These little indents and wells are going to form a paint palette. I love making palettes in all different shapes and sizes. They make beautiful gifts and are honestly much easier to create than you'd think. I'm making a fairly big paint palette from air dry clay this time. If you're going to make your very first paint palette, then I recommend making a smaller one, maybe with about 3 or 4 wells. I do actually have a video all about making paint palettes from air dry clay, if you'd also like to take a look at that. Simply with my finger I smooth anything that needs smoothing out, then I cut my shape. First of all scoring the shape, and then cutting it with my little knife. This one is quite a random shape, but you could use a large cookie cutter if you'd prefer to cut something like a simple disc. I love the gorgeous organic forms we can create with air dry clay. I like the idea of being able to hang up my paint palettes, so I'm taking a straw and making a hole for this. Then I would also like a little place for the paintbrushes to rest, so I use a paintbrush to make these indents. The beauty of a project like this, it can be just as you want it and completely unique. Before we leave the clay to fully air dry, I like to take a damp finger or damp sponge and smooth out the edges. I like to dry my clay out nice and slowly in a cooler spot of my home on a flat surface until it's fully dry, and then the clay turns fully white, just like this. You can sand it lightly, but make sure you do this in a well-ventilated space and wear a mask. Most people like their paint palettes to be white, so I'm giving this one 2 coats of white acrylic paint. Then my absolute favourite step, personalising them to the gift receiver. You can carry on using your paintbrush and acrylic paints, but I also have these acrylic markers that work great for adding these details. You don't need to be able to paint or draw, you can just add something really simple. I let that dry completely, and then we need to fully seal it so that it's completely watertight. One of the most effective ways of doing this is using UV resin. When I first of all said if this is the first paint palette you've ever made, make sure you go smaller. This is for the very reason, the sealing of it. Sealing it is easier when it's smaller. The larger the piece, it is harder to do. My paint palette video and resin video will help you a little bit more with this. This next air dry clay gift idea is very cute. I'd been making these small air dry clay boxes which take quite a long time and a bit more skill. So then I found these little tins that I know I can adapt and make beautiful with the air dry clay. Much simpler and easier and great fun to make. I rolled out the clay and then whatever shape your tin might be, indent this into the clay and then we can cut a top piece out. I use a ruler as it gives us a really great straight edge. The tin is really shiny, so we need to scuff up that surface in order to make sure the clay fully adheres to it. I add some white craft glue, and then we can add the air dry clay on top of this. I've added just a little bit too much there, so I just take a little bit away, just enough to make sure the whole surface is covered. You might have seen there's some matches, and this is going to be a matchbox. I've added the clay so that I can give the little box some detail. Taking a thin straw, I'm going to take away some of the edge to make it look a little bit like the edge of a postage stamp. A lovely design that I can leave to dry fully, then once fully dry we can paint our air dry clay. It's dried nicely and the clay is firmly in place. I take my acrylic paints and give it a good paint. Then the fun part of adding some detail. This is a nice one for a Valentine's gift. How would you decorate yours, or what would you write on it? Once the paint is fully dry, I make sure I seal everything, and this time I'm using a water-based acrylic varnish. I'll put the links of everything I use in the description below. After waiting for this to dry, it makes an absolutely gorgeous gift. I definitely would love to receive one. A few people have requested that I make a tea bag holder, and so here I have one. Air dry clay is for decorative purposes only. and can't be used for food and drink, but as the tea bag comes out, it can rest on here and then it goes straight in the bin or compost anyway. I'm making a little owl for my tea bag holder. I decided to add the eyes on top as a little 3D feature, and whenever we add any pieces of air dry clay together, we need to use the score and slip method. I go into this method in lots of my other videos. Like with any of the techniques that I'm using in this video, if you want more details, I do have other videos that you can go and check out and learn a bit more. But I'm having fun with this piece and building up a lovely little owl shape. Adding the features and then blending them together to make sure that piece all becomes one again. Quite often with air dry clay we do a lot of smoothing and we want that really smooth surface, but I actually love it when a piece needs lots of texture. The air dry clay takes on texture really well and eliminates the need to make it too smooth, especially if you don't enjoy that part. I've completed the flat piece, but I want this to be a little dish, so I have a small dish and some lids to help me with this. And I can place the air dry clay in here just to curl up those sides, just enough to make a little dish shape. I set this aside to dry fully. The eyes are going to be white and the rest a nice rusty colour. Again using acrylic paint for this, dry brushing a different colour over some of the texture and just adding some nice details. Letting it dry fully, and because I want it fully watertight, I'm adding a coat of UV resin. I've got my respirator mask on, the surface covered and my gloves on. Definitely easier with a water-based product, not necessarily recommending the UV resin. But if you can get it right, it does produce the best watertight results. Testing this one out, I think I'm going to have to keep it for myself. I love it. A simple dish to put by the front door or bedside to put keys, money, rings, jewellery in makes a really lovely gift. So that's what I'm rolling out now with this piece of air dry clay. I roll the clay about 8 to 10 millimeters in thickness. I love a project like this where we make a simple form and then the painting on it afterwards is what really brings it to life. This is going to be a little dish, so I want something around the outside to help hold the sides up. Look around your home to see what you can use. Spoons work great. I'll let this dry and share the painting of it with you later. Going from something bigger to a very tiny gift. Here I'm creating a tiny little pizza, and this is going to be part of a tic-tac-toe or noughts and crosses board. I'm being tiny and delicate with the details. This is the pizza crust that's going on the outside, making sure I blend that edge in so it joins really well. I love making miniature food items from air dry clay. I have another video where I made some other miniature foods, so you should take a look. I'll put the links in the description, but if you need anything else, please do comment below. If you find the way I made that too fiddly, then cut your little triangles and then indent it like this. There's always another way. I just like putting that extra lip on as it gives me that pizza crust effect. For the noughts and crosses or the tic-tac-toe, the pizza is one side and then I'm cutting some even tiny little balls, rolling them out and making these into little miniature breads, little loaves, for the other side. They need a little board, and so I'm using another one of those little metal tins, using a marker pen to mark the board on. The clay pieces are now dry, and so I want to paint them, again using acrylic paint. And a little trick to painting little tiny pieces like this, I have some blue tack and a bottle top. I can attach them all on and then hold this without having to hold that tiny piece while I paint. Once they're then dry, I can turn them over and paint the other side. I do recommend painting the base first and then turning over and painting the top. Adding in all the tiny details. If you have a tin that's a little bit bigger, then make the pieces to fit the size of the tin. The paint is all dry and my little tin is obviously metal, and so I'm adding some little miniature magnets on the bottom of my pieces, and this is going to make the tic-tac-toe and noughts and crosses work really well. A fun little game that you can just pop in your pocket. Have a think, who might you be able to gift this to? When I'm on holiday, I often take my air dry clay with me so I can do a bit of creativity there, and even more of an excuse to look around and see what you have and improvise for your tools. Sometimes the improvisations work even better than the real deal. The clay doesn't always have to be painted either, and a little technique I use in one of my other videos is to add some pepper. Whoops, I sprinkled out a little bit too much there. Seems crazy, I know, but adding lots of texture and details like this really does give a different feel to the clay. Just ever so slightly dampen it with some water and then put the pepper over the top to give it this lovely effect. These are going to be another tic-tac-toe board, little drawstring bag with the cross on it. Job done. The dish that I created with the spoons around the edge is now dry. I gave it 2 coats of a really pale blue acrylic paint, and then I decided to add a little bird using my paint pens again. I have a family member that I know is going to love this, and that's the great thing, you can personalize them however you wish. It's a good excuse to take your time and really enjoy adding all those details. I really like the matte finish that this already has, so I'm not going for a gloss finish here. I'm using a matte varnish. The varnish just looks like it disappears and you just get that matte finish again, but it's important to do this step as it does help protect the piece. And I love it. This next one is so simple and most associated with Chinese New Year. I roll the clay out slightly thinner than normal, cut out a disc, and I'm going to make some fortune cookies. Fortune cookies that you definitely can't eat. I fold one over so there's more air nearer the crease, just like this, pinching together at the join and then bending nice and lightly. Leaving one end slightly open, and I'm putting this stick stirrer in to make sure that when it dries we have a gap there. A really quick, simple and easy one, you can make quite a few, and then make some little personalized messages to go inside. The doves that I cut out and painted for my Christmas tree make gorgeous gifts, but they can also be painted in different ways at different times of the year. Here's an example painted in pink and red, lovely for Valentine's Day or a loved one's birthday. Personalize as you wish, then add some ribbon to be able to hang this up, and what a beautiful gift. Often we like to gift multiple gifts at a time and can therefore make many of the same item. And I have a really great way I love to duplicate my air dry clay pieces. And so I make one like this bird with a flat back. Then I take this silicone putty. It's a 2-part putty which you mix together and then simply add it over the top and it makes a mold. The mold sets really quickly and we're left with this, and it's so easy to use. I have other videos which show this in more detail, but it's definitely one to try. Air dry clay pieces like this are also really great to give as a gift alongside a pack of acrylic paints to someone that might love to sit and enjoy painting them and enjoy part of that creative process that you do. Which one of these air dry clay gift ideas are you going to try first? I hope you've enjoyed them and they've given you some inspiration. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you in my next video.